Hello, everybody, and welcome again to yet another OpenShift Commons briefing. This time, we're going to talk about something that I'm really excited about. The folks at Red Hat in our Insight group have done some amazing work around using a product called Dash and a company built by a company called Plotly. And we have their developer advocate, Chelsea, with us today, as well as Randy Eckerman and Anudha Gupta from Red Hat, who have been using it internally. And I'm going to stop there and let them introduce themselves, and they're going to walk us through what Dash is and talk a little bit about why we're using it at Red Hat, and we're going to go from there. So thank you all for being here today.
Great, thanks, Ann. Yeah, just a little bit of background. Anudha and I are both on the global business finance data science team at Red Hat. And that means basically we support all of our data asset creation and model building for our finance and sales at Red Hat. And we've been partnering with Chelsea on this demo and also for some internal applications that we've been building out on OpenShift. And I'll just give a little bit of a background on what brought us to using Dash on OpenShift, and then Chelsea will give a little bit more of a in-depth on what is Dash, and Anudha will put all that together and show how we can launch applications using Dash on OpenShift. So just a little bit of a context on what problem we were trying to solve was we were looking for a scalable way to deploy pretty data intensive applications to all of our sales and finance associates at Red Hat. Previously, we were hosting our own internal R Shiny server, and we're having some struggles kind of keeping up with demand on that. So some of the key things that we were considering was, one is we wanted to be able to host applications on, that was something that we weren't managing. That's really not our skill set. Two, wanted to stay as much as possible using Python, and that's typically what we build all of our analysis and models in. And it'd be great if we could kind of take it the last mile and deliver it to our users, just all staying in the Python ecosystem. And thirdly, we wanted to keep it as simple as possible from a development end. We wanted to have something that looked nice out of the box and with very little customization needed. And we certainly think Dash solves these problems, specifically Dash on OpenShift. And I'll hand it off to Chelsea to give a little bit more of an in-depth on Dash itself.
Great, thanks. So I'm Chelsea. I work on Plotly's Dash team now, and I work pretty closely with a lot of our users, and we're just trying to build out our deployment process and a lot of the Dash features. So I'll start kind of explaining what Dash is. So I'll start by visiting our Dash documentation, which is a really, really good resource if you'd like to get started with Dash, and that you can find just at dash.plot.ly. And so basically, Dash is a productive Python framework, and we've created this for the main purpose of building web applications. So it's built on top of Flask, Plotly.js, and React.js, and it's ideal for anyone working typically in Python. So basically, it's just a tool where you can create your web application all while working in Python. So in order to get started, we have all the packages on pip. So it's pretty easy to install. You just have to install Dash, Dash HTML components, Dash core components, and Dash render, and all of those are easily installed with the pip install command. So I'm going to pull up some code and start walking us through a pretty simple example. So here on my screen, let me try and zoom in a little. You can kind of see this a little better. So in this folder here, I have a proc file, which is which we'll open up in one moment. And then I also have a README for which we'll use to push to Git. The app.py, which will be the actual Dash application, and then a requirements.txt where we've filled in all of the pip packages that we're using in this application. So if I go ahead and open this up, we can take a look at the actual Dash code. Great. So here we'll see the app.py. And so this is just a Python file where I've imported a few Python packages here. So in addition to the Dash packages, I'm using pandas and then datetime as well. First, we can initialize the app and then also set the server variable. And then here, since we're building a web application, we'll want to use a CSS file. And our team here has created this very basic CSS style sheet, which we're hosting on CodePen. And I've added that to my app with this app.css append CSS function. So now we'll get to more of the Python code where I'm just reading in a CSV with pandas. And then I'm going to create two lists here where I'm grabbing the unique values from our continents column and then the unique values from our years column. So we'll see in a moment, I'm using the Gapminder dataset, which many of you are probably familiar with. And so I'll be using those continent and years lists throughout my application. So setting up my app here, I'm first creating the layout, which will be an overall HTML div, and then filling in those children with different sections that I want in the app. So first I'm setting up a header here with a different background color, and then I'm dividing the rest of the app there into some columns, which we'll see in one moment. So down here, we'll get to the good stuff. So in this row, I'm first setting a label where I'm adding the continents, and then I'm going to add a Dash core component, that's what DCC is standing for, drop down. And so I'll give the drop down an ID and then set the options for that drop down. I want this drop down to be composed of the continents that I've pulled out earlier. And I'm going to start with initialized value Asia. And then I want to be able to select multiple options here. So I'm going to set multi to true. And then I'm also going to add a slider here. And this slider is going to be composed of that years column. So down here, when I'm setting up the marks for the slider, I'm going to be using all of the elements in that years column that I have there. So now you'll notice that in both my DCC dropdown and my DCC slider, I've set up an ID. So we're going to use these IDs below in the callback function that I've written. So before we get to the callback function, we'll just quickly check here. This last div that I've set up is composed of a DCC.graph component, and this has the ID of my graph. So what I'm trying to do here is use the drop-down component and the slider component to update the graph. So we can do this with the app.callback, where I'm using those IDs that I've set above and then saying what I want to update. So in the graph, I want to update the figure. So the output's going to be my updated graph, and the input will be both the drop-down and slider values. So once those are updated, here we just have some code to create the graph. So if you have used Plotly before, you'll be super familiar with this code. It's very similar to creating graphs with our Python API, where I'm just defining the type of chart that I want to create, as well as X and Y values, and then some stylistic settings as well, including some layout style here. Great, so now that we kind of see what the app is set up to do, we can run this with Python app.py. And this is going to run locally and open up this application in my local host here. If I grab this and head to the browser, already have it opened here. So here we see that header with the different backgrounds that I've created. And we can also take a look, I can zoom out a little bit, at the dropdown, as well as the slider and the graph that I'm trying to update. So you'll notice that the graphs are plotly graphs, so they have all of our interactive functionality built in. So on hover, I get hover information. And then I also can zoom in or double click to zoom out. So zoom in by clicking and dragging, and then double clicking to zoom out of there. So here I'll just add a few continent options. And we'll get the Americas in there too. Great, so as I've added the options, you can see they've been added to my chart down here. And we do have this one outlier over here. So maybe we'll want to first take a look removing Asia. And so clicking on the chart will add, and clicking on the legend will add and remove those traces from the chart. So it's kind of another option to using the continents drop down here. So we'd also have the option of just removing Asia that way as well. And then we're also welcome to click and drag to zoom in a bit more there. So now if we add in all of our continents, we might want to see how here we're plotting the GDP per capita against life expectancy. And since my slider up here was including the years, I might want to update this to kind of see how these have changed over time. You can click and drag through there and see that as well. So with this example and many of the Dash examples, it's a really good way to kind of quickly put an application together where you can kind of explore your data set further, whether you're looking at changes over time or comparing multiple traces by adding different things via dropdown. It's a really good way to quickly get up and running with an exploratory tool. Great, so that kind of sums up the Dash example. One of the really nice things, so right now we're just looking at running this locally, but we also really encourage our users to push to GitHub as well. So I'm going to show you how you can kind of create your app folder and then push that to GitHub. So before I do that, I realized I've forgotten to go over the other files that we had in our folder. So I went through our app.py already, but we also have the proc file, which will be very relevant when we do the deploy, where you're just setting up the unicorn definition there and then adding the app server. And then also the README that we're using with to push to Git And then finally, our requirements.txt, where I've listed out the Python packages that I'm using here. So,
Chelsea, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. At the bottom of your screen, there's a little thing that says Blue Jeans Meeting is sharing there. If you just click on the hide.
Yep, sorry about that.
Hide that. And I didn't see I'm not sure whether it was because that was hiding it, but I didn't see the list of files we were talking about, and it could have been it was just obfuscated. So if you click.
Let me, okay, so you should be able to see this, right? Or sorry, that's the list you couldn't see, or?
There it's going. There's just a little jet lag here.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Great. So should I explain those?
Yeah, why don't you explain them again? I don't think we have any problem with that, and I can edit that in.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Okay, So before I discuss pushing to GitHub, I'll just quickly mention the other files that I had in my folder because we've discussed the app.py file. But I also have a requirements.txt file here. That includes all of the Dash packages as well as the other packages that I've used in my application. So just forgot to add pandas there, so we're adding pandas in. And then I have a readme.env, which I'll use when pushing to GitHub. And then the proc file as well, which will be used during the deployment process, which we'll discuss next. So in addition to running the app locally, you'll likely want to store your code somewhere. So one of the things you can do is push your application to GitHub. This is also really useful if you're working on a team and you have multiple people that are editing the app together. So here I've initialized my GitHub repo already with Git init, and then I can just check if I have any Git remote set up, which I don't. So now we'll just go GitHub. Great. So here I've, like I mentioned, I've initialized the repo. I've added a README there. I want to do git commit. We move over here. I'll do git commit. We'll do a git add to add those files, git commit. I want to do git remote add origin so I can add the origin of this GitHub repo that I've created online. Great, so now we should be able to come over here to dash demo, and we'll see all of my files here. So now I have my app on GitHub, and if one of my colleagues wants to help out, and they can clone or download this repository and then push up their changes to the repository as well. Okay, so that pretty much covers how to use Dash locally and one of the options you have for storing your code.
Awesome. Thanks. That was great. So I think we also have now Anudha on, who's going to talk us through some of what she's been doing with Dash at Red Hat. So Anudha? You want to share your screen?
Yeah. Hi everyone, I am Anudha, and I'll demo how to deploy a Dash application to OpenShift. So there are a few things to take care of when deploying Dash on OpenShift. Like the first thing is that the Dash app should be created and run through a file called visg.py. And within this visg.py, we should have a variable application pointing to the Flask server. And since we will be using Unicorn as a visg server, so the Unicorn configurations should be added to a file. We'll call it config.py. And then an environment variable app config should point to this config file, which will contain the Unicorn configuration. So let's deploy the app which Chelsea has just made. I already have the code here. So I'll start with extracting it here. And then, yeah, I'll open it in a terminal. Okay, so for OpenShift, we don't need a proc file. So let's remove it. And then first thing, since the Dash application should run from a file named visg.py, we'll rename the app.py to visg.py. Now, within this visg.py, we should have a variable called application pointing to the Flask server. So we'll rename it application. Okay, next thing we need is to add the Unicorn configuration. So we'll create a file config.py and add some basic Unicorn configurations like the number of threads we want, the number of workers we want, and forwarded allow IPs. So okay, so now we need an environment variable app config on OpenShift to point to this config.py file. For that, we'll have to create a file named environment within a .s2i folder in the project directory. So first, we'll make a folder named .s2i, and then we'll create a file environment within this .s2i folder. Okay, and here we just have to mention that the app config is this config.py file. Okay, let's check the requirements.txt. Yeah, I think we need to add pandas as well. So yeah, now we are all set to push this code, deploy it to OpenShift, and for that, first we'll have to put it on GitHub. So I'll do a git init. Okay, and I already have a blank demo repository here. I'll be pushing the code here. Okay, so now we have pushed the our sample code on GitHub. Now we can deploy it to OpenShift from there. So this is my OpenShift console, and I have a blank project dash already created here. So in order to deploy our source code, we'll first add a Python image here. Okay, we'll choose Python, and then application name is demo, and we'll add the GitHub repository URL. Now we'll create the project. Okay, now we see that the build is running for the application. So it's building the image. The image is built and it's being pushed to the registry. Okay, now a pod is being deployed with the image which just got created. Okay, so seems we are all set. This will take a minute. Yeah, and that's it. We have our application deployed to OpenShift.
Well, that was relatively.
So it's that simple to, yeah, quite simple.
So Anudha, this is all you had to do to get it up and running on OpenShift. And I think you showed there was some documentation you had with all those steps in your GitHub repo.
Yeah, I already have a GitHub repo with all the steps for deploying Dash on OpenShift and a few sample applications.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can coerce the Plotly folks into posting some of that in their documentation too, so that other people who are using Plotly and OpenShift have something similar. So someday, hopefully, we can get that subpage there and move that into some place that will get maintained for the long run, so that Anudha is not maintaining it forever. But this has been really good. It was pretty simple process to do that. I love how it was telling you to update your pip install to the new version there while we were waiting. Oh, I love that about Python. Always telling you to update stuff.
Yeah.
So this is then a very easy, I think, path to getting these analytic apps up and running and very easy to see. Anudha, did you want to add anything more into your presentation?
No, I think that's it. So we have seen how easy it is to create a dashboard application using only Python, and it's even easier to deploy.
Awesome. All right. Well, this I have to say is really amazing, because how many of us have tried to create graphical interfaces and applications and started from scratch? I don't know, me. I've been coding for so many years, and I am a devout Pythonista. So I certainly love this, and I know that it's something that and I definitely will be using, and it's been a wonderful tool for the Red Hat Insights team and the finance group over the past few years. So that's one, and we definitely love to see things that are so easily deployed on OpenShift with a few minor tweaks. And the use of source to image, I think, is a really good way of making sure that as new releases of Plotly and new updates to your application go, then you're kind of safe because it's easy to upgrade the images and without affecting the application itself. So Randy, I'm wondering if you want to add a few more words in there, or?
Yeah, I think you covered it really well. From our use case, it's been a huge success being able to scale out these applications in a way that really lets OpenShift do all the heavy. It's opened up a lot more of those resources that we were using other platforms on. Now we can do more cool analytics on those and let OpenShift host all of that. And Plotly itself as a framework, I think it's just terrific in its ease of use. It really has a nice learning curve that I think most people can get into and in a couple of days get up and running. So both technologies have been a big win for us and allowed us to really spread our work across the organization with relatively ease. So thanks to both Anudha and Chelsea for helping us out with that.
Yeah, thank you both. And Anudha, thank you for staying up late. I know you're in the far flung part of Red Hat out there in India and Pune. So we really appreciate you staying up and doing this for us. And we look forward to also showcasing other tools that Randy and his team are using in different aspects of AI and ML and data analytics. So look for more of those to come as I coerce them into presenting the other pieces of their toolkit, because it's, as we say, we do eat our own dog food and we treat our dogs very well. So hopefully we'll get some more time. So thanks again to everybody, and we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. And if you have any questions, I will put Chelsea and her resources and how to get to those links and Anudha's links into the YouTube video that's getting uploaded shortly. So thanks everybody, and have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are.
Yes.